What up, everybody? Time to do another review video. Now, before I get into this, I'm going to say, there's some terms that get kicked around in the knife community to describe a heavy-duty folding knife. And you usually hear that, it's built like a tank, or it's got bank vault lockup. And in my opinion, these terms get thrown around a little bit too much. There's very few folding knives that I ever come across that I would ever consider doing any super hardcore work with. And, I'm on record in my videos with my opinion of pretty much all folding knives. They are not as strong as fixed blade knives. I don't care who makes it, what company, what custom maker. It's still multiple parts put together with small hardware. It's never going to be as strong and as tough as a good fixed blade. But I probably am going to use some of those terms in this video to describe this knife. And this knife is the Cold Steel 4 Max. Now, this is probably the most heavy-duty, 100% beast folder that I've ever had the pleasure of holding in my hands. And I've had some heavy-duty knives. And I'm going to compare it to one of them, and that's the Medford Knife and Tool Praetorian. This knife is, I'm not going to say that it's stronger or it's better, because it's different, of course. It's totally different, actually. It gives me a sense of security, a sense of heavy-duty build that not even the Praetorian would give me. This is just, in your hand, it feels like, it just feels like solidity. It is so solid. Now, this is one of the newer Italian-produced 4 Maxes in the gray G10. This is an Andrew Demko design. Now, Andrew Demko is a custom maker. He's very well known for his knives being just overbuilt, way overbuilt. And he's very well known for his folding knife locking systems. And the one that he's mostly known for is the Triad system, which a lot of people are familiar with because it's used on cold steel knives. Now, Andrew works for Cold Steel Knives. As far as I know, he's the head of their R&D department. And he has licensed this Andrew Demko Triad lock to Cold Steel to use, and they use it widely across their product line. And it's pretty much understood to be the strongest folder locking system on the manufacturing market. I don't know a lot of people that would argue against that. I personally, it feels to me to be stronger. Have I done any test with it? Scientific test in a lab, with modern instruments to measure the pressure on it? No, I haven't. That's just a feeling that I get in hand. And I've absolutely never had a problem with the Triad lock. Now, the 4 Max model hit the market a few years ago, and it was basically marketed by Cold Steel as, it's basically a semi-custom, almost mid-tech version of Andrew Demko's 4 Max model, which he made as a custom. Now, I'm not super familiar with Andrew's work as far as price points, but I've seen his knives go from about $600 entry level up around the $2,000 range, depending on how dressed out they are. And of course, depending on materials and build complexity. When this model was first introduced by Cold Steel, it was an American-made model. I'm not sure who they had make it, but it had some initial growing pains Not that there was anything wrong with the quality of the knife or the action of the knife overall or the lockup of the knife. Most of the complaints that I saw had to do with unlocking the knife. It had some pretty bad lock stick in some cases. Whoever was making it was having a difficult time fine-tuning that triad lock. And you know what? Some knives, they come out, they have some growing pains. Some knives from some very big companies, even from very big custom makers, sometimes have growing pains. But these knives are now made in Italy. I don't know who's making them. It could be Lion Steel. It could be somebody else. There's a few production companies in Italy. They've been doing cutlery for, God, I don't even know how long, 1,000 years, whatever. And, I don't see any bad issues in this knife. It's overall very well made. Now, let's go ahead, do some specs, and then we'll dive back into the knife itself. This is a big-ass knife, okay? I have medium-sized hands, more on the large size of medium. You can see how big it is in my hand right there. This knife was designed to be as heavy-duty as it could be in a production knife with a 4-inch blade length. And that's what it has, a 4-inch blade length, which is about 10¼ centimeters. The blade stock thickness, 190 thousandths of an inch, or 4.83 millimeters, so almost 5 millimeter thick stock. The blade width, it is a wide blade profile. You're at 1.55 inches or 39.43 millimeters. The handle length is 6 inches or 15 centimeters. The handle thickness, 677 thousandths of an inch or 17.21 millimeters. The handle width, I measured at the widest point up here at the pivot, 1.8 inches or 45.82 millimeters. The closed width, the knife is fairly wide in the closed position. You can see you're at pretty much 2 inches or 52 millimeters. The overall length, 10 inches or 25¼ centimeters. And a substantial weight, guys, 10.05 ounces or 285 grams. Now, I'm going to throw in one more spec there that I typically don't do. In fact, this is probably the first video that I've done this on. And I think it just needs to be mentioned. And we're going to go with stop pin diameter. You can see that stop pin. That stop pin is 1/4 inch or 6.4 millimeters. That is a 1/4 inch thick stop pin for this triad lock system. And it's one of the reasons this knife feels so substantially fixed when it is open. Now, this knife has been marketed to us and marketed to us and marketed to us. Everybody knows how Cold Steel does their marketing. They're flamboyant. They're out there. They're loud about it. They got all their videos, stabbing through car hoods and busting concrete blocks and stabbing, practice targets and hunks of meat and, the big rope. And I mean, just everything. If you're not familiar with the Cold Steel videos, get them. They're free. Just contact Cold Steel. They're very entertaining. Now, here's the packaging. This is the 4Max packaging. It is a slip cover type packaging. We're going to go ahead and read here, blade length, overall length, steel type, weight, blade thickness, and the handle color. Now you can slip out of this cover. And you got a magnetic flap closure box with a piece of die cut sort of velour covered foam in there that's cut to the shape of the knife. So, decent boxing. Cold Steel products usually just come in a regular old cardboard box. So this is pretty decent, and it should be, because these knives are generally in the $350 to $390 range depending on where you get them. All right, for that $350 to $390 American greenback dollars, you get that nearly 1/4 inch thick, that 4.8 millimeter thick blade in CPM 20 CV. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with CPM 20 CV, it is a powder metallurgy type stainless steel. It is a very high carbided steel. The way it's alloyed, it has a lot of carbide adders alloyed into it. This steel was formerly known as Duratec 20 CV, and now it's found with the CPM moniker, which you typically see with crucible steels. It's crucible particle metallurgy, or powdered metallurgy, powdered steel. That has very high levels of corrosion resistant, very high levels of wear resistance. It is typically, you'll find it rock weld in the 60-62 range. It is renowned to be very fine grained. And typically, and I've read this, and I don't know, I've never sharpened 20 CV yet, but from what I've read, it's recommended you stay about 15 degrees per side or 30 degrees inclusive on your edge, because this steel is packed so highly with carbides. When you get to a finer edge, I think there's an issue with edge quality because of the carbide content. But I would assume it would be a very toothy, very aggressively cutting steel at whatever edge profile. Now, you see you've got the gray G10 here. And you know what? It has the appearance, sort of machined appearance, or a coarse bead blast appearance. And like most G10, you can see the layering because it is radially shaped, and so you see that's almost a wood grain type of look. You can see that it is round. It is 3D machined. No issues with that. It's G10, it's high quality, it's got a decent amount of traction, but it is not the brick pattern type you would see on the other cold steel products. It's not that coarse. It's a little smoother, but it does have some texture, maybe a little more than a blasted G10, maybe a machined sort of texture. All right, now this is a little bit of a change for cold steel because a lot of their triad knives do not have liners. This is a full liner build. I don't see where those liners are relieved in any way. They are titanium liners. You also have, I thought, a steel pivot, but I hit it with a magnet earlier. It was a very faint magnetic response with it, and I think that was just from the blade steel. I'm thinking that's a titanium pivot. So you've got titanium liners, titanium pivot, a titanium backspacer, and a titanium pocket clip. Well, that's way out of norm for cold steel. Already that is quite a bit higher end materials than they typically use in their knives that have liners. They use steel for the liners. So as far as the handle materials, the G10, you got the titanium all over the place. Of course, the triad locking components are in steel. They are hardened steel. And then your small hardware to affix the halves of the knife together are also steel. And I want to show you something. Look at the back of this, and you see that this is not two-sided hardware. In fact, look at that pocket clip. If you didn't know any better, you'd think, well, hell, I can't get that off. It's riveted on. But it's not. Those are actually the cap heads, the rounded heads of a female side to a bolt-together system. Your male side is on the show side, and this screw goes all the way through into a receiver, and it screws into that, clamping this together. All right, so it's all steel. It only screws apart from one side. That is an extremely strong way to build. And it's easy to maintain. You don't have to worry with a Torx head bit on each side. You only have to worry about one side. Another thing is, this pocket clip is done the same way. It goes through this substantial backspacer, this titanium backspacer. So you have the male hardware that is long. It's the full, depending on whatever the depth of the female part of the hardware is. But it's probably, 2/3 of the width of the handle, and then this female side of the hardware sits down in a recess. So to take this pocket clip off, you've got to do it from this side. Now, it's a straight pocket clip, so I imagine, since you've got the same bolt pattern on both sides for the two-sided hardware, that you could reverse that pocket clip. I did not try that myself, but I believe that you could. This is a very substantial backspacer. You can see that it is nearly covering the entire width of the handle at the butt end. That is, you can see how far down this piece of hardware is. That's how far down that backspacer is, because you don't see any exposed hardware. It's right at the edge of it, but that's how much of that hardware, or how much of that backspacer you have at the butt end. This is a very substantial build in every way. Not only do you have thick blade stock, you've got titanium liners, you've got a fully 4.8 millimeter wide build on this triad lock, and you've got this 4.8 millimeter thick backspacer that is pretty doggone substantial. As far as yeah, all right, guys, I'm squeezing that. You don't see no flex at all. This is a very substantial fill-in knife. All right. Just everything about it. Everything about it, guys. Blade thickness and the lock thickness and the handle materials with the titanium and G10, the way it's bolted together, the hardware. You've got this big old wide, not really pretty pocket clip, but it's substantial too. A quarter inch thick stop pin for that triad lock system. They say that this knife will hold 800 pounds of pressure against that triad lock system. There is no way possible, under any use approaching normal, that you are going to, with one hand, put 800 pounds of pressure against that lock. As long as the lock geometry is right, I don't think you're ever going to get this lock to fail. It's not going to come unlocked on you. It has a very deep plunge for that lock. You can see how much this end of the lock bar has risen up right and around the tang of the blade, and then how far that it drops down. That's the depth of your plunger on the lock. I don't think that that's going to accidentally become unlocked. Now, speaking of the lock and the issues, the growing pains that they had with the triad lock on this lock does have an instant sort of break worth of lock stick. It is almost like you would hear the trigger on a 1911 pistol described. I know you've heard this before, as it breaks like glass, like a glass rod that you take and it just snaps. That's the way the lock stick feels on this. It is not substantial at all. It just instantly, it breaks like glass, and that blade just drops. Now, you can see the center in here. It is damn near perfect. Guys, this is, $350 knife. It should be damn near perfect. Now, we'll go straight from that into fit and finish, and it's damn near perfect. For what you have here, a super heavy duty built knife. You know, this is not going to be the same type of feel and look as a true mid-tech knife from a custom maker. Those knives where you're paying $500, $600, and they're just about a full custom, but they're not. Those knives are ultimately smooth, and this is not ultimately smooth. You can see the fitting lines between the backspacer and the liners, the fitting knives, between the locking system and the liners. You know, you go around the edge, you can see here sort of the way light hits this. There is the very slightest, in some places, nail catch between the liners and the handle scales, the G10 handle scales. Most of this gap, that what you see, is a result of these parts being tumbled. That's not a result of bad fitting between the parts. It's a result of them being tumbled. There's everything in chamfered. Everything is tumbled. It's soft around the edge, and that's what you see in that gap. It's not a seamless sort of thing you would see in a custom knife. You got to remember, it is a production knife. Now, this does have a setted jimping on it, and it is the large half-round cutouts that is typical across a lot of cold steel products, except the raised pad portion gets the finer jimping on the lock bar, and it's useful. It's not the grabbiest jimping that I've ever felt, especially on just raw skin. Now, I imagine with a pair of gloves on, this jimping is actually made more for gloved hand use. I'll have to check that out myself later, but I would imagine that it is. The fit and finish overall on the handle, I mean, you're looking at it right here, guys. This is, you know, close up around the perimeter of this knife. Let's just go all the way around the perimeter of it. You can see exactly what the fit and finish is. You can see into the interior of the knife. Everything that you see, the back side of the lock and everything, is well machined, and it is, you know, all those parts are tumbled, so they have a consistent finish 360 degrees around. We'll close this down and take a look around the blade tang. There is where the plunger interacts with the blade tang. You can see how deep that is, but you go around this blade tang, everything is finished well, and damn, that's a big ass stop pin, guys. When this thing opens and it hits that stop pin, the sound of the lock setting is something else. It just, that's where you hear bank vault lock up. That's what it feels like. It is just extremely, extremely solid. It has a more solid feel than any folder that I've ever had in my hand. All right, on to the blade. Well, we're in 20 CV, a high-end steel. The grinds are even. Let's take a look at the plunge here. You can see that the plunge is very well done. It is a high flat grind. It's sort of a saber type of grind. You do have a flat section here, so those guys with the sharpeners, the clamp systems, this will be a great knife to sharpen. You do have this swedge at the back. You get good blade thickness towards the tip. You do have a good working tip. Excellent job sharpening this knife from the factory. It came very sharp, like most cold steel products do. This knife also does have a sharpening choil, although it's sort of hidden. The sharpening aspect of it is, it's more of a finger forward finger choil. But it does have a sharpening choil. It does drop down through the plunge grind down to the edge. So you can see very, very minimal sharpening flare at the termination of the edge here. it should be a joy to sharpen. Although it didn't need it coming from the factory, it had a pretty doggone decent edge, guys. And the edge grind is even on both sides. I'm going to give this blade and the edge, the primary grinds, the swedge grind, all an A+. Very much at the level that you would want this knife to be at the price point. All right, it has these big old stepped pyramid round thumb studs. I love them. They are 2-part. They are screwed together. They're not press fit, so they can be removed for, I don't even know what reason you would remove them. Maybe you want to refinish the blade. I don't know. And speaking of that, let's look at the blade finish. Guys, this, I'm trying to get to show this. Let's see if I can get light on it to show it really good. It has a stonewash finish. It is the coarsest stonewash finish I have ever seen on a knife. Whatever media they were using for the stonewash, it must have been huge. I could just imagine this in a tub with stonewash media that's an inch big. Because generally the bigger the media, the bigger the corners on the media, the coarser the stonewash. And the bigger media doesn't fit together as compactly in the tub, and you don't get the real super tight, real fine stonewash that you do with smaller media. When you stonewash a blade, you have to actually experiment with your media, whether you're going to use lubricant in it or not. And this is a very coarse, very utilitarian stonewash. In fact, the only thing that I would have done differently on this knife, myself, would have been the blade finish. I personally do not like that coarse of a stonewash finish. I wish it would have been a little finer. Does that make any difference in the use of the knife? Hell no. It doesn't make any difference at all, guys. It's just an aesthetic thing. It's just a personal thing. And, I've done a little stonewashing myself, so I've got a particular way that I would do the stonewash. And that's just me. And then everything else on it, like I say, everything else is pretty much, it's got a tumbled finish on it, a finer finish. The pocket clip and backspacer and locking mechanisms, all of this, the liners, everything is all tumbled, and it's a finer finish on it. So, what do I think about this knife overall? It's a big, heavy knife. It's 10 ounces. They say 9.9 on the box. I got 10.05, 285 grams. It's a heavy knife, but when you pick it up, the first thing you think is not, damn, this is heavy. The first thing you think is, that's about right. It's a big-ass knife, guys. It's a big old wide blade and a big, thick stock thickness and a big wide handle profile and you're almost 7/10 of an inch wide or thick on the handle. It takes a lot in there when you've got that blade thickness, nearly 5 millimeters. You got to do the same thing in this central section with your lock parts and your backspacer. So once you add liners onto that and then handle scales, you're going to get out there in the thickness. The pocket clip, like I said, it's ugly. It's an ugly pocket clip, guys. I'm sorry. Andrew Demko, if that's your design, I apologize, brother. It is ugly, but this is sort of like the ugly girl that you take out once and she turns out to be a super freak. All right? It works really well. I slipped this down in my pocket with multiple materials. It slipped in. It held well. The knife actually carries smaller than what it seems in the hand. Now, I'll tell you, I carried this in a pair of ratty old basketball shorts with worn out elastic around the waist, and it was fine. Now, if I would have jumped around, yeah, it would have probably pulled my shorts down, but it carried just fine. And, Good Lord. I started out thinking that this is my Grail cold steel knife, and I really wanted to get one of these. LTK, Love Them Knives, sent this to me as part of a little pass around care package loaner, and after having it in hand, I'm going to say I want one. I'm going to have to buy one. I don't know when I'll ever be able to afford it, but I want one, guys. And that right there says everything. I don't have to say that I would recommend it. All I have to say is I want one. And that's, to me, that's recommendation enough when you watch a knife review. All right, guys. I really enjoyed this one. This is the last knife that I got from LTK. Love Them Knives. And again, brother, I say thank you. I very much enjoyed reviewing these. They were some killer knives. I had a killer time with them. We're going to get them boxed back up, sent back to you, but thank you very much. For those of you that saw my video yesterday, you know I changed the name of my channel, and I hope that goes well. I want to say thank you to everybody that subbed to me. Thank you to everybody that takes the time to watch this video. God bless all of you, and we will talk to you again.